Today, we're going to be doing a super fun VFX shot inspired by my favorite video game series, Portal. Like always, if you want to work along with me, I have everything I use down below. Okay, so let's get started by motion tracking our actual footage. So I'm going to come up here to plus VFX motion tracking, and then you can just open up the footage I have linked in the description. Now, one thing to note is that I went ahead and converted it to a PNG sequence, and that's just because I didn't want it to be tied down by frame rate. So I'm going to go ahead and hit A to select everything and open the clip. Then let's set the scene frames and prefetch our footage. And also I want to come up here to the render properties, down to color management, and set the filmic from filmic to standard. Let's go ahead and pull some of these down. Now I'm not going to really be going over the camera tracking settings of this tutorial. I have a full dedicated video on camera tracking, but let's set the match to previous frame, normalize, and then set the correlation to a 0.9. Let's go ahead and detect some features. So I'm going to hit that, go down to this menu, set the threshold to a 0.01, and then distance to an 80, and then Control T to track those forward. Once we're at the end, we can detect some more features, and then Control Shift T to track backwards. I also like to have some trackers start from the middle, so I'm going to go to frame 130, detect some features again, hit Control T to track them forward, and then once that's finished, we can go ahead and go back to frame 130 and Control Shift T to track them backwards. Now that we have that, let's just do kind of a manual pass of our trackers. You'll notice that we have this graph down here. I basically just want to kind of delete all these outliers, these big kind of green spikes in our graph. So I'm going to go ahead and select those and just delete those individually. Those are the markers that are kind of going a little bit haywire in certain areas, and so that will give us a bad track. So we just want to try to delete those as much as possible before we solve the camera motion. Now that we have that, we can scroll this down, and I'm going to come over to the Solve tab. Let's just refine everything first of all. And then A and B keyframe is the area with the most parallax. I believe with testing, I found that frame 160 to 200 is kind of the most parallax area. So I'm going to set that. So 160, 200. And of course, I do have the focal length of my camera. So I want to come to the tracking settings, go down to camera, lens, and set the focal length to a 26, which is the focal length I shot in. And then we can go ahead and solve the camera motion. Okay, so here's our first solve error up here. Let's try to get that down lower to a lower number. Let's clean the tracks and then just set our reprojection error to something high, so it's only skimming off kind of the top error tracks, and then we can resolve. Okay, so that got our solve error down. Let's do that a couple more times until we get a lower number. Okay, so I cleaned my tracks a couple more times and was able to get my solve error down to a 0.2, which is really good. Let's go ahead and get our actual scene set up. So scroll down, set background and tracking scene. And then we can go ahead, right click, join areas. I want to go ahead and position this plane on our wall. And so we have these 3 points here. I'm just going to select those 3 to use as our wall. So click wall over there. And you can see it's orientated our scene pretty nicely. You can see that this ground plane roughly follows the floor of my actual scene. And then I want to go ahead and set the scale of our scene. So these two objects will be basically the width of this paper. And if we know from in real life paper, it's about 8.5 inches. And so that converted to meters is about 0.21 meters. So what I want to do is set the scale, and then the distance I want to put 0.21. So now it's the correct scale of our scene. Not super important for this side, but it's always just good rule of thumb. And then I want to select this middle button right there and set the origin to that. And now we have our scene kind of roughly rotated. We can worry about getting it very exact in a little bit, but I want to come out to the layout tab, and then let's go ahead and delete some of the stuff it automatically sets up. So the background and foreground collection, also the background view layer, we can just go ahead and exit out of that. Then in compositing, we want to delete these 4 nodes and plug the movie clip into the alpha over. Now that that's all set up, let's come out to the layout tab, and this is where we really want to make sure our scene is motion tracked correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these, and then we can go ahead, I want to add a new mesh plane and rotate that on the X 90 degrees. And then if we go into our camera mode, you'll see that I actually got a pretty good track, so it follows the wall very well. But if for any reason yours doesn't follow the wall like mine, what we can do is go ahead and add a new empty plane axis. Then what I want to do is parent the camera to that empty. So I'm going to select the camera and then select the empty. You want to make sure the empty is highlighted yellow and not the camera. Then if we Control P, parent that to object, we can go ahead and move around the empty, and it'll also move around our camera. And what that allows us to do is actually go ahead and move our camera separately from the camera track. So if we come over here to the motion tracking, I want to enable that, maybe turn down the size a little bit so we can see kind of the middle of the actual dots right there. And then if I go into the camera view and hide our plane, we'll notice that we have these points right here. Let's go ahead and select these points because these points are going to be what I want to be on the x-axis of our entire scene. So with those points selected, let's go ahead and select our empty right there. And I want to move these points to basically be in line with this red line right here. And so if I G and then Y, I can move those back. And then if I position them like roughly like right there, you'll see the two in the middle are kind of a little bit off, but these four on the side are very, exactly on this axis. And so hopefully law of averages should say that, that is correct. Let's go back out here, Alt H, unhide that thing. And then if we GX, move that over to kind of this wall right here. If we scrub through our footage, you'll notice that it doesn't stick super well to the wall. But again, that doesn't really matter as much for this specific shot. If I was doing this, and needed a super accurate motion track, then this wouldn't be good enough. But, we are within the realm of error right there. So let's go ahead and let's delete that. And I went ahead and went inside of Nuke and actually made my own kind of portal asset that you can download down below. So we want to go ahead and import that in. To import that in, I like to use the Images as Planes add-on. So Edit, Preferences, Add-on. And then if we do Images as Planes, you'll see this add-on comes default with Blender. So you just want to make sure that that's checked. And then with that, if we hit F3 and then type in Images as Planes, you'll see it pops up. We want to import that in and then locate our footage. Okay, so here it is. Here's the movie clip. I want to import that in. And then if we size that up and then actually go into the rendered mode, we can see that this is what it's doing. We don't see our background footage anymore. And so to fix that, let's come up to Render Properties, go down to Film and set that to Transparent. And then we can just size this up. Whatever we do with the portal, we want to make sure that we always stick on this x-axis, because if I actually bring this out, let's say if I Y move that out, then it won't be sticking on the wall. It'll kind of be floating in midair. And so we just want to avoid that as much as possible. So when you are sizing this, kind of size it up like that, and then maybe somewhere around there. You can play around with how big you actually want the portal to be, but that looks pretty good for my scene. We are going to be sticking in Eevee for this tutorial, so that's really nice. We'll get fast renders there. But what I noticed is that we actually have this object affected by light. If I go ahead and bring in a light in our scene, you can see if I bring it around here, it's affected by all the light. And I don't want that. I kind of want this to be not affected by any lighting at all. So I'm going to X delete the light I have. Let's come select our portal. Bring this out here, go to Shading Editor, and then hit N to hide that annoying window on the side. And now what we can do is we have this automatically set up by the Import Images as Planes add-on. And what we need to do is delete the principled BSDF, because that is actually what's giving us the shading. And then if we plug the color into the surface, you'll see that now we have the portal actually not being affected by light, but we have lossy transparency. And so a little workaround that I found that works for this scene is to Shift A. We're going to add a mix shader. Let's plug that in there. We actually want the portal to be on the bottom shader socket. And then if I make a new node, and it's the transparent BSDF, we want to plug that BSDF into the top shader. And then that's worked pretty well, but we can still see a little bit of gray. And so that's where we plug the alpha into our factor. And now we have full transparency without our actual object being affected by any of the lighting in our scene. Okay, so let's bring this window down over here. And what we want to do now is basically create a plane to hide everything behind it. So right now, if I place a cube kind of, in the background right here, we shouldn't be able to see the cube outside of our portal. And so what I'm going to do is let's Shift A, add a mesh plane. We're going to again rotate that on the X 90 degrees. I'm going to place that kind of there. And then let's go ahead and scale this up just until it kind of covers everything right there. And then what we want to do is we want to cut out this hole in the middle. And so a way I kind of find to do that, since it is kind of an ellipse, is go over here to the modifier tab, add modifier, and go down to subdivision surface. And that basically just, smooths everything out. You use it a lot in modeling and everything. But what we actually want to do is go into tab with that plane selected, then hold Control R to add a loop cut. And then if we go to the side, you'll notice that this kind of yellow line comes. We want to click and then drag that up to kind of the top of our little thing over here. We can do the same thing but vertical if we again control R and then come down here, click that line and then place that, you know, on the edge, and then let's just do the same to the bottom and to the right. So again, just control R and kind of place those there. And so now if we select this middle face, we're going to X to delete the faces right there, and you'll notice that it's basically kind of created a round shape like that. Let's come back out here, and then what we want to do is we basically want to take these edges right here. So if you hit 2 or select the edge mode up here, we want to just shift select all those edges and then G, Z, move that up until the top, you know, you can see right here is basically lining up there. And then we want to do the same exact thing and select these edges right here, G, and then X, and move those so that the hole is basically on the edge of our portal. Okay, so now that we have that set up, let's come out of edit mode, and we want to set this to be a holdout material. So let's come over here to the object properties, down to visibility, and there's this mask section right here. I'm just going to select that to be holdout, and now you can see that whatever is behind our actual holdout material is not rendered, but of course, since we cut out a hole in the middle of our portal, we still are seeing the cube behind that. So let's go ahead and delete the cube. And so now to actually make the portal environment, we could just take a image and project that and just have that behind the thing, but since we're actually moving throughout the scene, there is going to be lots of parallax, and so we actually want a 3D object of the actual scene in our you know, world behind the portal. And so what I did is I actually went in game and took a image. You can of course do this as well, and just took an image that I wanted to use. Of course you can download that below, but I do highly recommend that you guys go in the scene and, you know, create your own image, or, you know, an environment in the game that you want to see, or you can even do different, you know, worlds behind the image. It doesn't have to be this. This is kind of just a workflow that I wanted to do. And so what we can do is I want to go ahead and file, new, general, and we're going to open up a whole new scene. And then what we actually need to do is go into a add-on called F-Spy. And what F-Spy allows us to do is actually take an image and then get the focal length of that image, and then we're going to use that to project our image onto a 3D object of our scene. So let's go ahead and do it. Let's come, this is F-Spy right here. I want to drop my image into here. Again, you can download that below. I want to go ahead and dim the image, and then you'll see all these lines. I want to basically align those to the scene. So I'm going to align this green one to the floor here, and then I'll do this one to the ceiling. And we do want the lines to kind of be perpendicular. If you think of the green as the Y and then the red as the X, you'll notice that it kind of makes a 90-degree angle. So we want to try to copy that. I'm just going to bring this here, maybe this line right there. And then of course I want a line going in the similar direction. So I might pick this one right over here, and just perpendicular to there, and you can see that's basically the scene setup. If I come down here and bring this down here, and I'll also go to 3D guide and set XY grid floor, you'll notice that our grid floor is roughly kind of following the actual floor of the image I shot in Portal. So what we can do now is you know, Control S, save that, and then I want to save this. We'll do Portal tutorial, so name that file and then save that. And then we can exit out of F-Spy. And then inside of our Blender project, we actually need to import that in. So you'll need to download the F-Spy importer add-on. So edit preferences add-ons, just install that add-on. The link is down below. And then once that is installed, you just want to make sure you have that checked again. And then with that, we can go up to File, Import, and then F-Spy and locate that F-Spy project. Okay, so here's my F-Spy project, so I'm going to import that in, and it's automatically created a new camera. So let's just go ahead and delete the cube, the light, and also this camera over here. And now, if I Shift-A, add a mesh plane, we can see that it's basically on the floor, and if I G-Shift-Z, kind of move that around, you'll notice that it's staying on the floor. So what I want to do is, again, G-Shift-Z to move on every axis but the Z-axis. I want to position this kind of on the corner of the wall here, and what I'm going to do now is hit tab, go in the edit mode, to edge select, and then I want to Y, move that kind of over here, and I'm basically just going to model out the scene as it is inside a Portal. So to do that, we're just going to GX, move that back somewhere around there, and then select this face, edge, and then we're just going to extrude that on the Y direction, so hit Y, and then just move that out. I actually picked this place inside the Portal because it's a very easy scene to edit. and actually model inside of Blender. So E again, hit Y, extrude that over here, and then finally select that, E and X, move that over there. Again, you do kind of want to make sure you get the corners right. So actually what I'm going to do is select the camera up here. Let's come out of edit mode first and then select the camera. Go to the camera settings, background images, and then change the opacity up. Now I might even go up here and change the floor off just so we can see a little bit nicer. And so if I kind of come here, I want to see where the floor actually connects. So Alt H connects right there. Okay. So G, X right there. And so now with everything selected, let's go ahead and just select all of our faces. I'm going to go ahead and hit E to extrude that up. And then what I want to do is go to wireframe view, and I basically just want to position it so that this face is kind of, you know, exactly where that ceiling meets, which is like right there. It might be hard for you to see on YouTube, but you just want to line it up with that scene. And then we want to take the, first we want to go ahead and delete these faces out here so we can actually see inside of here. And then what we want to do is select these three faces, because if I come back out to the wireframe mode, this ceiling is taller. So let's E extrude that up on the z-axis right until we meet the corner. And so now we basically have the scene modeled out like it would actually be inside of the Portal game, but we don't have any textures on it. And so that's actually where we can go ahead and project some textures on it. And so what I want to do is, first of all, let's come to the camera mode and go to rendered, just so we can see everything as it's going to be seen in our actual you know, motion track scene. So let's go ahead and bring a new window out. I want to come and go to the shader editor again, hit N. We're going to add a new material. So add that. I'm just going to name this Portal Room, like that. And then again, we don't want anything to be shaded in our scene. So we're just going to exit out of that. Going to add a image texture node, and then drag the color into the surface like we did for the actual, you know, import images as planes. And then what we can do is come over here, and we have the Portal F-Spy image that I use. So we're just going to import that in. And now finally what we need to do is project this in a way that the camera is acting as like a projector, and it's going to project on our actual material and object over here. So what we can do with the Node Wrangler add-on installed, so edit preferences, you want to type in Node Wrangler. This is another one that comes default with Blender. You just want to make sure that's checked. So with that, we can Control T, add a texture coordinate and mapping node. And then if we plug the window into our vector instead of UV, we have this result. And then we can see these weird clipping issues. So I want to go ahead and instead of repeat, I want it to be mirror, just so it's a little bit nicer, kind of textured outside of our camera there. So now what that's done is basically on our object, it's projected the actual texture as we see it. If I do kind of zoom out here or whatever, you will notice that it follows our camera view. So in order to actually bake that into our, you know, final thing, what we can go ahead and do is I want to go back into edit mode. So hit tab, then hit A to select all of our faces. And then if I hit U, it'll go into the UV mapping section where I want to go to project from view. And so since we're from the camera's point of view, it's basically projecting it from the camera's point of view. Now, if I come back out here, I want to set UV back to the vector, and you'll see we have this result. It's very distorted and not like our original photo at all. You can see if I hide and unhide it, it's a little bit of distortion, and that's because you know, there's not enough actual geometry for it to project on its very big faces. And so a way to fix this is to actually come over here. We want to go to the modifiers tab, add a subdivision surface modifier. We want it to be on simple, so it's not curving our walls. And then let's just set both of these up to the highest value, 6, and apply that. Now if we go into edit mode, there's a lot more geometry like that. And so again, A, U, project from view, and now that we have that, we can see everything is matching very nicely to the actual background footage. If I hide and unhide that now, you won't see a lot of distortion at all. One thing I do want to do is go ahead and set this to color management standard, and you'll see the colors are matching very nicely now. And if I actually come out of the view, we actually have this kind of scene set up, and it actually has like some of our textures on the wall, and we can basically play around with it like we were in the actual game. So now what we want to do is, of course, we want to save our project. So Control S, let's save this. I'm just going to name this Portal Room Asset, like that. And then if we go ahead and save that, we want to go back to our other project now. So I'm going to open recent and go back to the tutorial file that we had before. And then I want to go ahead and import that in. An easy way to do that inside of Blender, let's go to File and then Append. And we just want to locate that creation file, which is right here. I want to double click inside of that, then go to Object. And then we have this portal room object. We don't need the F-Spy camera since we already have our motion track camera in our scene. So I'm going to import that in. And then you can see that now we have our actual room in the scene, which is looking nice. Okay, so inside the render view, you'll notice that our camera is upside down. And so what I'm going to do is go ahead and select everything. And then we're just going to rotate on the x-axis 180 degrees so that now our camera is facing upright. Of course, when we imported it in, our object was facing the right way. So let's just do the opposite. So RX 180 again, just for this plane, this room right here. And then let's go ahead and, of course, size that down until it basically matches, roughly the height that it would actually be. So I'm actually going to come over here and it would be like around there. We can play around with it in a bit. And then what we want to do, of course, is to, position this exactly where it would be. So let's RZ and then position that like right there. And then, of course, we need to kind of match the floor plane, which that looks like it's roughly matching. It's not super important, but I do want to make sure that the scale looks correct. So like right there, I think looks pretty good to me. Okay, so after you get it in a position that you like and looks kind of believable for your scene, what you will notice is like towards the end over here, we will start to see some of the actual other half of the room. And so an easy way to just get rid of all that is let's select our portal room object and then go to edit mode. And then basically what I want to do is I want to select wireframes first of all up here just so we can see all of our stuff. And then anything kind of part over here that we're not going to see, I just want to go ahead and get rid of that. So I'm just going to box select this entire section over here. And it doesn't matter as long as we're not going to see it through our actual portal. It's safe to delete. So let's go ahead and delete those faces. And so now we don't see anything, and that's actually again because of our holdout texture. So you just want to make sure that whatever kind of object and stuff you're seeing over here, you just want to delete that geometry. And so now that we have this effect, you can either leave this as the effect that we're going for, or I want to go ahead and break it down and composite it separately so we can get a cooler result inside of Blender. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and first I want to go to compositing, and we have used nodes. Let's go and render out a image. And so basically right now, if we go ahead and shift control click this node, this is what is rendering out of our actual 3D viewport. And then it's basically combining on top of this movie clip with the alpha over node. So what I actually want to do is go ahead and break out our portal and the background separately from each other. And then we can composite them separately and get a really good looking result. So to do that, let's come back out to Layout tab. I want to go ahead and create some collections to organize some things. So I'm going to go ahead and create two collections. One, I want to be the portal itself. And then the other one I want to be the room. And so of course, let's place the correct things in the correct positions. Okay, so for the room, I want to have our portal room object, of course. And I also want to have this plane object. If you remember, that's actually our holdout material that we have over here. So I want to place both of those in the room collection right there. And then of course, I want to place our portal image that we imported in. I want to place that into its own collection in the portal collection. And then we still see everything is rendered in itself. So what we can do is I want to rename this. First of all, I'll just name this one portal. And so for this one, I don't want the room to be shown. So I can just turn that one off. And then let's create a new view layer and make this one room. And of course, just do the opposite, turn the portal off. And now we have just the room. So let's, save our project, go to compositing. Then I want to go ahead and Shift D, duplicate that out. And we can see at the bottom, we have this render layers node being our portal. And of course, we want to set this one to be our room. And so let's render out another image. Now that we have that, we can shift control click this and you'll see that it's our room. And then now we have the portal. And so of course, if we go to the alpha over, we have lost the room because it's not automatically being combined again. And so an easy way to get that back is let's just Shift D, duplicate this alpha over. I'm going to place the render layers together in this alpha over. Let's view that. You can see I've placed it on incorrectly. You actually want the room render layers above the portal like that. and then we can plug this image into the image stock before, and now we basically have the original result, but now we have it broken down to where we can actually separately affect the different passes. So say I wanted to make this portal look a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add a glare node, and that's basically just going to add some haze and some, bloom in our scene. So I'm going to add a fog glow and then just turn the threshold down. You can see if I select that and hit M, it's basically just adding some extra glow in our scene. What I could actually do is just duplicate this to get even more glow. So something like that, that's looking really cool. And then what I also might want to do is go ahead and increase the brightness of it a little bit. So I'm going to add let's add an exposure node and plug that there. And I might turn the exposure up like that, just so it's kind of, more of a glowing effect. You can, of course, play around with it, get a look that you want. But that's a really cool result right there. And then, of course, I might want to try to match the black levels of our scene. You'll notice that the black levels aren't really matching. And so what we can do is Shift A, add a color balance node right there. I'm going to go to the offset power slope, and I might zoom in a little bit and just play around with a little bit of the black level. Might decrease that just a little bit. Again, this is where I went inside of like Nuke, or if you want a free version, DaVinci Resolve has an amazing compositor. That's where you can really get a really cool look for you and play around with it. Just have some fun, because at the end of the day, compositing is the most important thing I feel for visual effects to make it look good. So yeah, so you can mess around with it, add some more nodes, go fun with this however you want it to look. I'm actually going to delete one of the glare nodes. I feel like it's too much glare. And then once you're happy with the compositing result, if we go ahead and I'll select these just to have some fun and show before and after. So here's what it was before, and then with some compositing, we're able to get this result, which, looks pretty cool as well. Okay, so now for the final rendering, let's come back out to Layout tab. I'm going to increase my sample count. So come here, my render samples, let's set that to like a 256. I don't think it matters as much for Eevee, but just kind of a rule of thumb I like to follow. Let's go ahead, just for fun, let's set ambient occlusion on and bloom on, and then screen space, reflections, and motion blur. I believe those first three aren't really going to have too many ramifications since we don't have any emissive materials or any shading in our scene in general, but I just like to have those on in general. You could also mess around with the depth of field, but for my camera that I was using, it didn't have, a lot of depth of field. And so now we can go down to the output properties, go set your file location, of course, and this is up to you if you want to render out as a PNG sequence or a movie clip. Since this is Eevee and it's going to literally take me like 3 minutes to render out this entire thing, I'm just going to go ahead and render as a movie file. So FFmpeg video, then encoding, I'm going to set this to be a QuickTime, and then set this to be high quality. And then whenever you're done with those, we can come up here and render the animation. Okay, so here is the final result that we got. Hopefully you guys got something similar and looking pretty cool inside of Blender. Again, I did take my final thing into Nuke for compositing, and so I was able to match the grain and also, add some light on the floor and also bounce light on the wall. Again, Nuke and DaVinci and even After Effects are great tools to use for visual effects artists to get really cool results. Anyways, I greatly appreciate it if you like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next tutorial.